These are not soaring times for higher education. Tuition costs rise unchecked. Contempt for today's campus culture, the trigger warnings, safe spaces, microaggressions help swing the election. And this past week, President-elect Donald Trump nominated former WWE executive Linda McMahon to lead the Department of Education, an agency that each year distributes billions to U.S. colleges, some that Trump has vowed to tax and sue for their, quote, wokeness. But if America does one thing well, it's innovation. Conceived largely by frustrated professors at schools like Harvard, Princeton, and Brown, the University of Austin started classes this fall. A college startup touting open debate, a shout nothing but say anything philosophy, and for now, free tuition. Will this be just another politicized campus swinging right, or a true disruptor resetting the marketplace of ideas?
The story will continue in a moment.
140 years old, the University of Texas at Austin ranks among the country's largest schools. Football games draw more than 100,000 fans. But blocks away, in between a Ruth's Chris and a Velvet Taco, on a floor of what was once a downtown department store, one of America's smallest universities, UATX, the University of Austin.
How would you describe members of the founding class?
Very outspoken. You'll never enter a conversation and leave without something that you didn't know before talking to someone.
Olivia Antunes, Dylan Wu, Constantine Whitmire, Grace Price, and Jacob Hornstein are among the 92 students in the inaugural class. If UT is built around Longhorn football, the focal point of UATX...
Pursuing the truth.
So you start by telling the truth.
Pursuit of truth.
Fearless pursuit of truth to me is, I have this kind of mentality that the best way that you should go about your life is to always assume that you're wrong in some capacity.
You're prepared for that.
Right.
To be challenged and stress tested and confronted?
It's not just even prepared. That's why I'm at this school. I want them to be challenged because I know that I'm wrong in some way.
What are some things that differentiate you guys?
We're very intellectually diverse. I've met people of every political persuasion here, from like far left Democrats who are for Bernie Sanders, or to the left of that even, to people who would make Donald Trump look like a liberal.
Roughly half the students come from Texas, a third are female. They share academic strength, averaging in the 92nd percentile on the SAT. Some were accepted at schools like the University of Chicago and Georgetown, but chose UATX for what it is and is not.
I remember visiting a college in the northeast of the U.S., and the student guiding me there was like, we have different dorms for different student groups. I didn't want to go to a space that was like that.
Why do you think it's important to be at a college where differing views aren't just accepted, tolerated, but welcome?
We're actually listening to the other side and understanding each other. And still, we're friends with each other. I vehemently disagree with many of the things Jacob says, and I think you do too. I don't want to...
It's like why?
We still get along pretty well, and it's a beautiful thing.
Not exactly the vibe on so many other campuses. Long before Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th, colleges have been sites of protest and have leaned left. But the atmosphere has intensified over the past decade. Speakers shouted down.
You're not listening.
Professors canceled when students feel unheard.
End Hamas now!
Then the reckoning this past year. Campus chaos led first to congressional hearings.
Ms. McGill, the fact is that Penn regulates speech that it doesn't like.
Then to the resignation of the presidents at Columbia, University of Pennsylvania, and Harvard.
From a historian's point of view, it's terribly important that the United States improves, reforms, revitalizes its universities.
Scottish-born, Oxford-educated, and recently knighted, Neil Ferguson is one of the founders of UATX. An historian, also known for his conservative views, Ferguson spent more than a decade as a professor at Harvard and is now a senior fellow at Stanford's Hoover Institution.
You say something is rotten in the state of academia. What do you mean by that?
Right up until, I guess, the early 2000s, it still seemed like universities were the places where you could think most freely and speak most freely and take the most intellectual risk. And at some point in the last 10 years, that changed. And it changed in a way that began to stifle free expression.
We came across some data that less than 3% of the Harvard faculty identifies as conservative, more than 75% identifies as liberal. Wildly out of proportion with the American public.
There's a huge disconnect now between the academic elite and the average American voter.
Ferguson says this political imbalance, plus social media, plus an army of campus administrators monitoring speech, equals a culture where, per one study, nearly 80% of today's students self-censor on campus for fear of being ostracized. Faculty feels the chill too.
The president of a university I won't name once told me that he received, on average, 1 email a day from a member of the university community calling for somebody else to be fired for something they'd said. That reminds me vividly of the bad old days of Stalin's Soviet Union, and yet it's happening on American campuses.
The stakes are that high.
I think if a university system starts to go wrong, then something is bound to go wrong for the society as a whole. The ideas that start on campus pretty quickly spread to corporations, to media organizations. University forms the way you think about the world for the rest of your life. If our universities are screwed up, and I believe they are, then that will screw up America as a whole quite quickly.
In 2021, Ferguson launched UATX with former New York Times journalist Barry Weiss, Joe Lonsdale, co-founder of data analytics company Palantir, and Pano Kanellos, the former president of St. John's College in Maryland. Larry Summers, the former Harvard president and U.S. Treasury Secretary under Clinton, became an advisor. In this ad, they announced they were done waiting for America's universities to fix themselves. UATX received initial approval from the state of Texas and raised nearly $200 million from private donors, in part to cover tuition.
Good morning, everyone.
Kanellos was named president.
Our work is to stir up settled ideas.
He says that, to the detriment of learning, colleges have become echo chambers.
What is going on campuses that are leading you to draw this conclusion?
It's as if people have come to expect that they're just sort of two versions of everything. And therefore, there's a right version and a wrong version, and depending on which side you stand. But the truth is that one opinion meeting another opinion shouldn't leave us with two opinions, it should leave us with better opinions.
Let me ask you, what do you mean by that exactly?
The Christian values that we have.
To combat fears of saying the wrong thing in class, UATX comes armed with a weapon.
Tell an American audience, what do you mean by Chatham House rule?
The Chatham House rule is a great British invention, and it says that if you are a participant in a discussion and you hear an interesting thing said, maybe a controversial thing, you can refer to the information that you've gleaned, but you can't attribute it to a person. People fear that the thing they said that was not right, was politically incorrect, ends up on X, or for that matter on Instagram. And that which happens in the classroom should stay in the classroom.
At UATX, classes are small, seminar-style, and based in Western civilization, the Bible, Greek classics. Faculty includes a former Navy captain, a Greek Orthodox priest, Father Maximos teaches a class on chaos and civilization, and a tech entrepreneur.
You're trying to play the Steve Jobs role here, right?
There are no on-campus science labs, but founders chose Austin for its booming startup culture, linking students with companies like Elon Musk's Neuralink.
How do you take this cutting-edge research
and helping the kids sharpen their tech skills and even fund their own ideas?
We have both a nonprofit and a startup side.
To stem the scandalously high costs of higher education, the UATX campus is bare bones.
How many potatoes do we need? All of them cut, or just let's cut?
No dorms, the students live in apartments next to UT undergrads, and no meal plan. Cook for yourselves, kids. The closest thing we found to a college rager, students learning the Texas two-step.
When the guys next door are playing beer pong and you're reading Aristotle and working with lasers.
Playing chess.
Any envy?
Now, that's not to say that we're all prudes and we just spend our all day reading Aristotle. We have fun.
Yeah.
As for admissions, UATX swaps DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, for what some call MEI, merit, excellence, and intelligence.
Gender, race, ethnicity, what is the factor of that in your admissions decisions?
We don't take any of that into consideration in admissions. The primary thing that we're interested in is the mind.
Meaning what?
The kind of capacity to think deeply, to answer questions, to challenge norms.
I got to tell you, we did not see a particularly diverse student body.
We are putting resources into finding talent of an intellectual variety. And if you're interested in diversity, I recommend you look at the social backgrounds of our students, at the family circumstances of our students.
High-profile UATX donors include Trump-backing billionaire Bill Ackman, a Harvard grad who vocally criticized his school after October 7th, and Harlan Crow, close friend of conservative Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. Critics attack UATX as a right-wing university simply wearing the cloak of free speech.
UATX has been called the anti-woke university. Harvard is a liberal university. UATX is going to be a conservative university.
Politics should be studied at a university. It shouldn't be the operating system of university. Any university that is identifiably political is not fulfilling its highest mission.
Pushback might be, are you going to be too dependent to donors? We've seen on other campuses what happens when the donor class gets dissatisfied. Are you worried about that?
If donors are ever pushing us in a way that is not aligned with our mission in that, somebody's going to call us out on it.
And the backers aren't solely from the right. A liberal, legal scholar Nadine Strawson was president of the ACLU for nearly 20 years. She is now a UATX advisor.
The most important topics of public policy debate are not being candidly and frankly discussed on campus, including abortion, immigration, police practices, anything to do with race and gender.
Provided it comes with no serious harm, Strawson argues all speech should be allowed.
You think censorship leads to worse outcomes than allowing even the most objectively hateful speech?
My concern is to try to eliminate the underlying discriminatory attitudes. You don't do that by punishing expression. You do that through education, through more speech, not less.
Free-range free speech resonated. When UATX announced its founding, thousands sent in job inquiries. Some of UATX's academics were disciplined, canceled, they may say, at their previous schools.
Some of the advisors and faculty came here under some clouds of controversy.
I mean, that's not what we're seeking. I mean, we're not, shelter for
haven for the canceled.
Haven for people who've canceled. But many of the people who are pushing boundaries in academic culture, let's say in the public sphere, have paid a price for that and still should be heard.
UATX's national accreditation won't be decided until the first class has graduated, a standard for new universities. Meanwhile, applications are open for the second class. Tuition still free, so is the speech.